In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, June 3rd, here in South Korea. 48 African nations will attend the inaugural Korea-Africa Summit tomorrow, that is Tuesday morning, following a welcome dinner scheduled for this Monday evening, amid a host of bilateral meetings between President Yoon Suk-yeol and 25 of his African counterparts on the sidelines of the main event. Meanwhile, North Korea says it will halt its floating of waste-carrying balloons into South Korea, claiming its campaign had been effective. The announcement follows South Korea's pledge to adopt stern countermeasures, including frontline loudspeaker broadcasts into North Korea. And on the sidelines of the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, top defense officials representing Seoul, Tokyo and Washington agreed to engage in a multi-domain exercise dubbed Freedom Edge this summer to bolster their trilateral security posture against Pyongyang's provocations. Bolstering trade ties and securing key minerals are some of the broader objectives of the Korea-Africa Summit, which is scheduled to start Tuesday morning. Now, this is according to President Yoon Suk-yeol in an interview with the Agence France-Presse, a French international news agency that was published this past Sunday. He pointed out that Korea is, quote, a high-tech manufacturing powerhouse that relies heavily on imports for over 95% of its raw mineral needs, which he hopes Africa will serve to satisfy greatly going forward. In return, he spoke of sharing Korea's strategy for economic growth and infrastructure development. On the sidelines of the multilateral summit with close to 50 African nations tomorrow, President Yoon has been holding separate bilateral meetings with the visiting heads of government who are able to attend the inaugural summit in person. And having said that, President Yoon Suk-yeol sat down separately with his Tanzanian and Ethiopian counterparts this past weekend on the sidelines of the upcoming multilateral summit. Our Kim Jong-sil, that is, covers these bilateral interactions.
With the much-anticipated first-ever Korea-Africa Summit just one day away, the South Korean president met with the leaders of Tanzania and Ethiopia over the weekend. At a lunch meeting on Sunday, President Yoon met with Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan and signed an MOU on the stable supply of key minerals. President Yoon expressed his hopes for a swift conclusion of negotiations for an economic partnership agreement between the two countries. President Hassan said she hopes more South Korean companies would participate in Tanzania's development projects. Later on Sunday, President Yoon had dinner with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali and discussed ways to improve their bilateral cooperation. President Yoon expressed his hopes that more South Korean companies would enter the Ethiopian market and contribute to its economic development. Prime Minister Abiy expressed his expectation that the bilateral cooperation would expand to various fields, including mineral development and the defense industry. The Ethiopian and Tanzanian leaders also agreed to enforce sanctions against North Korea as its nuclear and missile development violates UN Security Council resolutions. On Monday evening, a night before the summit's opening on Tuesday, President Yoon will host a welcome dinner for the attending leaders and delegations. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Up next, a former Korean ambassador to a number of African nations believes partnership between Korea and the continent needs to be centered on empowering ordinary people. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young covers his thoughts.
Empowering people and their livelihoods must be at the core of South Korea's partnership with African countries as they look to pursue shared growth, sustainability and solidarity. That's according to diplomat and academic Park Jong-dae, a leading expert on Korean soft power diplomacy. While Seoul's multilateral engagement with 48 African countries this week comes late compared to other advanced economies, Park says South Korea has unique merits to offer.
It is natural, I think, that now we step up and meet the challenge to assume greater capabilities, and that is in line with the government vision, President Yoon Suk-yeol's vision of a global pivotal state, that we want to be also a leader in international fields, in also universal values, okay? and security and promotion of prosperity, and we can share our experiences, which is vital, especially for developing countries.
With food shortages, severe weather events, internal conflicts and corruption hindering socio-economic growth in African countries, the former ambassador to Uganda and South Africa raised the need for a people-centered approach rather than temporary military or political solutions.
So I think human capital development should be our centerpiece of collaboration, because it really determines everything. And Africa does not have challenges in development because it lacks resources or means, or even lack of institutions. They have. But what is the problem is lack of implementation and follow-up, and that requires human capacity, which is not only level of education, but the attitude, mindset for development.
PAG has told African communities they need not wait for assistance, as he initiated various projects in Uganda inspired by the Hemao or New Village movement. The community-driven effort in the 70s helped drive South Korea's per capita income from $65 in 1965 to roughly $5,000 by the late 80s.
Why it's important is because it stresses ownership. For example, the motto of Semaurundong is diligence, self-help, and cooperation. It's not about getting funding, getting assistance, or being dependent. It's about self-empowerment, which I think is crucial for the success of all the development projects. And it's the fastest way that Africa can get out of poverty and to achieve development.
He hopes the two-day summit will serve as a springboard for more targeted cooperation between African states and South Korea, as well as non-governmental actors and businesses in areas like agribusiness, digital technology, energy and infrastructure.
So your acquaintance with Africa, it stretches beyond your long distinguished career as a diplomat. It goes back to your childhood years as a boy living in Uganda. So on a personal note, how do you hope to see more cultural or people-to-people exchanges between the countries?
Yes, having lived in Africa when I was a youngster and having returned as a diplomat, there's certain myths that has to be dispelled. For example, many people think that the living conditions in Africa is very harsh with the detrimental environment. That is not the case. While Africa has huge desert, Saharan desert and Sahel region, but it also has very fertile land. But largely, it has the endowment. It's very much blessed. And also it has rich minerals, precious minerals. So there are huge potential. But what attracted me most is people are very open and pragmatic and flexible. Since this is the first time ever that Korea has invited the vast majority of African heads of state, and it's a very useful occasion to use it as important momentum to jumpstart our collaborative relations, and also to spur exchanges, cultural exchanges, people-to-people exchanges, but also academic exchanges. And our goal is to make it successful so that we'll be able to continue this summit on a regular basis.
Well, on that note, we really do hope for the success of this first ever Korea-Africa Summit. And thank you so much for your time today, Ambassador.
Okay, it was a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
South Korea may have found 14 billion barrels of crude oil and natural gas off its east coast. Now, this is according to President Yoon in a press conference earlier on this Monday morning, adding that he had approved drilling for confirmation after a geophysics study showed signs of fossil fuels. The estimated 14 billion barrels of oil and gas, worth some $1.4 trillion, could supply Korea with crude oil for 4 years and natural gas for 29 years. Drilling will begin late this year, and the size of the reserves is expected to be confirmed in the first half of next year. If confirmed, commercial drilling may start as early as 2027, with reserves ready for the market in 2035. In other news, North Korea says it will halt its floating of waste-carrying balloons into South Korea following the latter's threat of retaliation. Our Peunji has the latest.
Around 600 balloons carrying cigarette butts, waste paper, and plastic bags were flown from North Korea over the weekend, on top of the around 260 balloons carrying waste and excrement sent earlier last week. This prompted the South Korean military to advise people to be aware of falling objects and not to touch objects suspected of being from North Korea, and asking people to report such items to the military or police instead. In response, the South Korean government said Sunday that it's ready to take unbearable measures against North Korea's actions, which could include resuming blasting anti-Pyongyang messages across the inter-Korean border. Seoul's National Security Advisor Chang Ho-jin on Sunday warned Pyongyang to cease provocative actions, such as launching balloons carrying waste and disrupting South Korea's satellite navigation system.
We are clearly warning North Korea once again not to engage in provocations such as balloon bombs filled with filth or GPS jamming. If such actions are repeated, we will ramp up our response.
A senior presidential official said the South will not rule out reactivating loudspeaker campaigns that broadcast anti-Pyongyang messages, which have been suspected since 2018 as part of an inter-Korean military agreement to diffuse tensions along the border. Following Seoul's warning, Pyongyang announced that it would stop sending trash balloons across the border, but claimed that its campaign had been an effective countermeasure against propaganda sent by anti-regime activists in South Korea. An expert says the intention behind the North's move is because the regime feels its legitimacy is being questioned, after feeling belittled and marginalized following the 75 years of inter-Korean competition.
Now, more specifically, the North is also trying to insult the South Koreans just before the commencement of the Africa Summit, but it stopped the balloon launches before most of the leaders arrived. So I think it was a deliberate timing.
He added that anything flown over sovereign airspace is indeed provocative, and that it's a violation of the Korean Armistice Agreement signed in 1953. Peunji, Arirang News.
Over in Singapore, top defense officials from Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington have agreed to engage in a multi-domain exercise this summer to bolster their trilateral security posture against Pyongyang's provocations. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
South Korea's defense ministry announced Sunday that Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo agreed to launch a trilateral multi-domain exercise this summer in a move to strengthen security cooperation against Pyongyang's evolving threats. The ministry said the agreement was reached between the defense chiefs of the three countries during three-way talks on the sidelines of the Shangri-La Dialogue Security Conference in Singapore over the weekend. Dubbed Freedom Edge, it will be held across a number of domains, including cyber, air, maritime, and underwater. The exercise takes its name from bilateral exercises the U.S. holds with its two Asian allies, Freedom Shield with South Korea and Keen Edge with Japan. No further details of the planned three-way exercise, including the timing or location, were provided. While the three allies have previously held joint maritime and air drills, this summer's Freedom Edge would mark the first exercise of its kind after their leaders agreed on various efforts to deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats at Camp David last year. During the three-way talks between the defense chiefs over the weekend, they agreed to come up with a framework document for trilateral security cooperation efforts by the end of this year, while also agreeing to optimize their system to share North Korean missile warning data in real time. The announcement from the ministry also comes amid North Korea's recent provocations, including several short-range ballistic missiles being launched last week, as well as the sending of hundreds of balloons carrying trash and other waste. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Also, amid the mounting hostility between the two Koreas, foreign pundits who recently attended the Peace Forum on Jeju Island sought to share their views on tensions here and the prospects ahead. Our Moon Hae-ryun covers their thoughts.
The chief U.S. negotiator during the 1994 North Korean nuclear crisis, Robert Gallucci, has said it's a bad idea for the U.S. to consider redeploying tactical nuclear weapons to the Korean peninsula. While visiting South Korea for an annual peace forum held on Jeju Island, he said having these weapons on South Korean territory would not improve the country's security.
You're not doing the South Koreans any favors, you're certainly not doing the North Koreans any favors, and you're not doing the United States of America any favors. Because you are arguing for weapons of mass destruction to be reintroduced to the environment on the Korean Peninsula.
In a press conference on Friday, he also added that it's important for Washington to work closely with Seoul and to focus on normalizing relations with North Korea before talking about denuclearization.
We should talk about normalization of relations, and only after we succeed to some degree at that, and in so doing reduce the risk that North Korea perceives it must run with the United States of America, only after we succeed in changing that calculation should we think there's any prospect of moving them on their nuclear weapons program, freezing the program, reducing it, never mind eliminating it. We'll get to that, hopefully.
Another expert who took part in this year's Jeju Forum said even if Trump is re-elected, North Korea will only return to talks if Kim Jong-un feels there will be a successful deal.
Remembering the failure of the Hanoi summit and the embarrassment he felt, I don't think he's going to return to talks right away. I think he's going to try to increase his leverage by advancing his missile program first.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump walked out of the Hanoi summit in February 2019 after Kim Jong-un asked for the removal of nearly all sanctions on North Korea in exchange for dismantling the nuclear facility in Yongbyon. Noting that there is 0% chance of negotiation between Washington and Pyongyang under the Biden administration, she said the North will likely to continue to engage in provocations this year in order to perfect its weapons capability. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, China claims its Chang'e 6 lunar probe landed on the far side of the moon early Sunday morning. The Chinese spacecraft is set to collect samples from that part of the moon before returning to Earth. According to the China National Space Administration, the far side of the moon has been, quote, rarely explored, and that the collection of samples there will be, quote, the first time in human history. On a light note now, the bucolic backdrop of Chuncheon in Gangwon-do province was recently the venue of a cultural event seeking to share the unique assets of different Korean cities. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin was there.
Chuncheon, Gangwon-do province, is famous for its spicy stir-fried chicken 닭갈비 and as the filming location of the hit drama Winter Sonata. But there was a lot more that visitors could explore over the weekend at the 2024 Korea City of Culture Expo. The Culture Ministry has so far designated over 20 cities across Korea as cities of culture. These cities receive government funding to further develop their unique cultural assets and tourist attractions. Since 2021, the cities at the Expo have their own booths to showcase their culture, with this year being the event's 4th edition.
Over the course of 5 years, we've designated 28 cities as cities of culture. We've gathered here in Chuncheon to showcase and compare the diverse culture that each city has. This festival-like celebration allows people to see firsthand the development and transformation of each region after being designated as a city of culture.
While big cities can be grand and glamorous, small cities have this easygoing and simple vibe. Chuncheon is a perfect example of this. Our city has been named the best city of culture for 2 consecutive years. So as a Chuncheon resident, the fact that our city is hosting this expo as the chair city this year is even a bigger honor.
Ahead of Friday's opening night festivities, a K-pop dance concert called K-pop Playground was held, featuring girl group Haiki and renowned dance crews Ambitious and Holy Bang from the reality shows Street Woman Fighter and Street Man Fighter. But the highlight was the Expo's opening performance. In collaboration with the Chuncheon International Mime Festival, one of the world's top 3 mime festivals, alongside the UK's London Mime and France's Mimos Mime Festival, the opening performance, Fire City, featured mime acts and a grand fire show. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Chuncheon.
Meanwhile, here in Seoul, its foreign residents believe Gwanghwamun Square is the capital city's defining landmark. Our An Sung-jin tells us why.
The Gwanghwamun complex is a spacious area in Jongno-gu district and is home to not only various companies but also historical sites as well, attracting both local and foreign residents as well as tourists. What makes this area so special? From skyscrapers to palaces and nature, out of the numerous places one can visit in Seoul, Gwanghwamun Square was ranked first as the capital's representative landmark. This is according to a survey of foreign residents by the Seoul metropolitan government. Nearly half of those surveyed chose Gwanghwamun Square.
So I think it's pretty amazing to have the contrast between the old architecture and the mountains. So that I really like.
In particular for me, I knew this place because I watched The King, Eternal Monarch. So it's one of my best K-dramas. So I said, oh, I have to go there. So for me, it's based on the K-drama. So yeah.
Gwanghwamun Square used to be the main street of the capital Hanyang during the Joseon dynasty. It encapsulates the history of South Korea through its cultural heritage, including the statues of King Sejong the Great and Admiral Lee Sun-shin. With the historical view of Gyeongbokgung Palace in the background, now this space hosts various cultural events for the public to enjoy. People also gather here to cheer on sports teams or to protest. An expert further explains why this space attracts so many people.
A public square attracts a lot of people and acts as a hub. Located in one of the city centers, the biggest attractiveness of this area is that it's completely open and pedestrian-friendly. That's why it makes a great place for tourists as well to come see the view of the palace, the Blue House and Bugaksan Mountain in the background.
Whether it's to embrace the historical significance or the modern cultural events it holds, Gwanghwamun Square is open to the public to grasp the Korean experience. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. We begin today in the US, where a mass shooting just after midnight on Sunday local time in Akron, Ohio, has left at least 1 dead and 24 injured. Akron City Police Department have said that no one has yet been arrested or identified as a suspect. According to local media sources, officers at the scene discovered dozens of bullet casings and a gun. In a joint statement, Akron Mayor Shamas Malik and Police Chief Brian Harding said the incident in a residential area of the city was a horrific shooting, saying they need the help of our community for anonymous sources of information on the shooting. Now to elections in South Africa, where the country's president and head of the ANC party, Cyril Ramaphosa, called for unity on Sunday as the results showed that the African National Congress had lost its outright majority for the first time in 30 years. According to the official results, the ANC 159 seats in the 400-seat National Assembly, down from 230 seats. South Africa's second-largest party, the centre-right Democratic Alliance, maintained their position with 87 seats won. Former President Jacob Zuma's newly launched MK party came in third, picking up 58 seats. With under 50% of votes, the ANC now has 2 weeks to form a coalition government. The main opposition Democratic Alliance Party says it is open to a deal. Real Madrid has presented its Champions League trophy to thousands of fans in the Spanish capital, Madrid, after victory on Saturday. Los Blancos beat Borussia Dortmund by 2-0 to be crowned the best club team in Europe for the 15th time. Dani Carvajal and Vinicius Jr. were the scorers, with the latter becoming the first Brazilian player to score in 2 Champions League finals. Thousands of fans gathered at Cibeles Square on Sunday for the second time this season as Real Madrid celebrated its Champions League victory following May's La Liga success. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Brace for a scorcher if you're in the west. Temperatures should go up a couple of degrees higher than Sunday, hovering in the upper 20s, while the east coast will continue to have breezy day with easterly winds. But southern parts of the country should have on and off passing rain from late this afternoon into tonight, along with thunderstorms. Gwangju, Jeollanam-do, and west of Gyeongsang-namdo province could see 5 to 30 millimeters of rainfall. The rest of the country will be under sunny skies all day. So strong UV rays expected for most places this afternoon with a high of 28 degrees here in Seoul. Gwangju should see a high of 29 degrees. But the air quality will be normal to good nationwide all day today. And as we kick off the month of June, temperatures will be trending in the right direction. By Wednesday, Seoul will see a high of 30 degrees Celsius, and morning temperatures will also get warmer. Sunny and dry weather in the forecast for this week. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, and that ends Monday's afternoon newscast. Coming up next is our daily panel session, and today we have our foreign correspondents sharing their thoughts on the upcoming Korea-Africa Summit slated for tomorrow, that is Tuesday.